What if silence wasn't weakness, but a weapon? What if a boy didn't fight back? Not because he couldn't, but because he knew the world was already watching. In a courtroom packed with whispers and cold stares, a 16-year-old boy sat in, cuffs, bruised, but still. He didn't cry, he didn't speak. And when a uniformed officer struck him across the face in full view of the judge, no one stopped it. No one even blinked, because they thought they already knew who he was. But they were wrong. This wasn't just another case. This was a story built on silence, one that would speak louder than any scream. And this boy, Malik Thompson, wasn't just anyone. He was a mirror held up to a broken system. The response didn't come loud. It came quiet. It came with silence. And what you're about to hear changes everything. The officer didn't yell. He didn't warn. He just walked up to a 16-year-old boy in cuffs and slapped him across the face, right there in front of the judge. The sound was sharp. The room froze, and Malik Thompson didn't move. He didn't shout, didn't cry. He just wiped the blood from his lip, slow, deliberate, and turned his head. Because the door had opened, and standing there, silent, was his father. What would you do if someone struck your child in court? While the law watched in silence, Malik's father didn't speak. He didn't lunge. He didn't threaten. He just stood there. And somehow, that changed everything. But the silence wasn't new. You could feel it the moment Malik had walked. And it was the kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was heavy. Heavy with judgment. Heavy with presumption. Malik didn't look dangerous. He wasn't shouting. Wasn't resisting. He just walked with quiet steps that echoed louder than they should have on the polished courtroom floor. He was flanked by 2 deputies. Eyes followed him like heat-seeking missiles. Someone whispered from behind. He must have done something bad. And just like that, Malik Thompson was already guilty. Officer Grant took the stand like he'd done it 100 times before. Composed, confident, cocky. He didn't even glance at Malik. Didn't need to. He had the badge, the courtroom, the system behind him. He spoke like he was reading the weather. The boy resisted. Got mouthy. I had to restrain him. The judge nodded, didn't even look up. That nod was the real sentence. Malik sat perfectly still. No slouch, no fear. Like this wasn't the first courtroom he'd survived. Hands in his lap, eyes steady. And then, calm as a whisper, he tilted his head and asked, "Is this your idea of law?" No threat, no attitude, just a question, but it landed like a slap. Officer Grant froze, only for a beat. Then, with 1 step, 2, he marched right up to Malik and backhanded him across the face. The shock hit the room like static. Gasps. But no one moved. Not the bailiff, not the judge, not even the lawyers. Malik didn't cry, didn't flinch. He reached up, wiped the blood, and smiled. Not big, not dramatic, just enough to say, "You just made a mistake you'll regret forever." And the room went still again, this time in fear, because he didn't respond how they expected him to. No rage, no outburst, just quiet defiance, the kind that makes power nervous. The judge called for a recess. The courtroom shifted, murmured, moved like shadows. And that's when she appeared, a woman with calm steps and sharp eyes. Ava Brooks, court-appointed defense. Not new to this building, not new to seeing kids like Malik thrown into systems designed to swallow them, whole. She walked slowly, knelt beside him, careful not to make him feel cornered. "I'm Ava," she said gently. "They've asked me to represent you. Can you tell me your name?" He didn't look at her right away. He studied the floor, then turned, measured, slow. And for the first time since entering the courtroom, Malik spoke. "Names don't mean anything in here. No attitude, no heat. Just the voice of someone who'd watched names get chewed up and forgotten." Ava paused, then said, "I'd still like to know what to call you." A moment. A breath. Malik, he said. Malik Thompson. She wrote it down. Checked the file. No priors. No red flags. That made her frown, because the boy in front of her didn't match the paperwork. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He was controlled, too controlled. Then she saw it, a thin silver chain tucked under his shirt. It wasn't flashy, wasn't for show. It looked personal, private. As Malik shifted slightly in his seat, the chain caught the light. Ava leaned just enough to read the engraving. Thompson, FBI, field office. Her breath hitched. She didn't say a word. He saw it in her eyes. Without a word, he reached up and tucked the chain back beneath his collar. Deliberate. Calm. Not hiding, he murmured. Just done explaining. Then added, whatever you think that means. It won't change how they see me in here. And right then, Ava knew. This boy wasn't trying to win. He was trying to survive. They say recess is when you catch your breath. For Malik, it was just another round. The courtroom emptied slightly, noise creeping back in. Paper cups, phone taps, low murmurs. But Malik sat alone at the defense table, still cuffed, still silent, and then they came. 2 officers. No urgency, no command. They strolled up like this was routine. We're doing a sweep, one said flatly. Protocol. They didn't wait for approval. They yanked open his backpack, right there, in the middle of the courtroom. Not in a hallway, not in private. There, where everyone could see. They dumped notebooks, spilled pens, crumpled paper, unwrapped a sandwich, tossed it aside like garbage. And Malik, he just sat there, watching the pieces of his life hit the floor like they were worthless. Ava stood fast. He's not under arrest for possession. You have no grounds. Ma'am, the officer cut her off. We're doing our job. File a complaint later. Later. That word again, a concrete wall the system throws up every time you try to breathe. One officer scribbled something, tore, off a slip, slapped it onto the desk beside the mess. Suspicious behavior. No drugs, no weapon, no anything. But still, a mark. Malik didn't flinch, didn't protest. He simply reached down and began packing everything back into the bag. One item at a time. Carefully. Like this was muscle memory. Like he'd done it before. That's when the younger officer leaned toward his partner and muttered, just loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, future inmate, not a student. Time didn't stop. But hearts did. Even Ava froze. Malik zipped the bag shut. Eyes down, like he already knew this part by heart. Then, Officer Grant returned, arms crossed, that crooked smile back on his face. He stepped forward and dropped a folded report under the judge's bench. Your Honor, I'd like to add resisting arrest and obstruction to the report. The defendant became uncooperative during transport, he added. Voice calm. Bureaucratic, as if it was just another box to tick. Judge Walters barely looked at the paper. Didn't glance at Malik. Didn't ask questions. He adjusted his glasses. Clicked. His pen, charges noted. Added to the docket. Just like that. Then the judge said it. Not with malice. Not with emotion. But with indifference. Sometimes you have to treat them like what they'll become. No one gasped, because no one was surprised, only sickened. Ava clenched her jaw. Malik didn't even blink. And sitting there, watching it all unfold, you realized he wasn't on trial. He was being told who he was allowed to become. But that moment, that quiet, aching, hopeless moment, wasn't the end. Because someone was watching. From the back of the courtroom, in silence, in stillness, waiting. Court resumed, but nothing felt resumed. The law had spoken, but not with justice, just with habit. And Malik, he sat exactly where he was, still cuffed, still centered, still alone, but not quite. Ava Brooks had been silent during the last recess. Not from defeat, from focus. Something had changed in her. Not fear, not panic. Precision. She walked back to the center of the courtroom, a flash drive pinched between her fingers like a surgeon holding a scalpel. Her voice didn't tremble. "Your Honor," she said, steady and low, "I have new evidence. Recorded from a civilian security camera on Darrow and 5th. Judge Walters looked up, eyebrow raised, but said nothing. It shows the incident Officer Grant described, and it tells a very different story. She handed the drive to the clerk, who plugged it into the courtroom monitor. The screen flickered, then played. Grainy, but clear enough. There stood Malik, not shouting, not fighting, just standing. Between Officer Grant and an elderly black man with a cane, visibly confused, scared, the man reached out, pleading. Grant shoved him. Hard. The old man stumbled, and Malik, just a kid, caught him. He didn't hit anyone, didn't push back, just stepped in. A human shield. And the courtroom stopped. Even jurors leaned forward. The gallery froze. Ava's voice cut through the stillness. "This contradicts Officer Grant's sworn statement. It shows my client acted to prevent harm, not cause it." For a moment, it felt like justice cracked, open. Like maybe, just maybe, today would be different. But Judge Walters leaned back, removed his glasses, wiped them slowly, and without even looking up, said, "Unverified footage, dismissed." Just like that. No explanation, no further review, no question. Truth filed away. You could feel the room deflate, not with shock, but with the kind of disappointment that's been rehearsed for generations. The kind that says, "You expected better. That's your fault." Ava froze, only for a second. But Officer Grant, he smiled. Wider than he had all morning. "It's always not their fault," he said, "until they're in handcuffs." And that's when Malik looked up. First time since the slap. He turned his head, met Grant's eyes, voice quiet, not dramatic, not angry, just true. "You're not the first to bury the truth, but I might be the last to stay buried." The words didn't echo. They didn't have to. They landed. Heavy. And that's when it started. The shifting in seats, the tightening in chests, the recognition, not of Malik's voice, but of every time someone like him had been pushed down and told to stay there. But Malik? He went still again, hands folded, eyes low, not hiding, just waiting. And for the first time, the courtroom wasn't judging him, it was watching him. Ava sat beside him, but she wasn't trying to console. She was trying to understand. He hadn't yelled, hadn't slouched, hadn't blinked when the truth got swept aside like dust. But something had shifted. In the way he breathed, the way his silence wrapped tighter around him. He leaned ever so slightly and slid a folded piece of paper toward her. No urgency, no eye contact. She opened it. 5 words. Watch. Don't act. Not yet. It wasn't a request. It wasn't fear. It was direction. And for a moment, Ava wasn't sure who was defending whom. Then she saw it. As Malik shifted, his sleeve adjusted. And underneath, she spotted a watch. Plain. Digital. Nothing special. Until you knew what you were looking at, Ava knew. Exactly that model, issued by the Bureau, given to family members of agents on volatile assignments. 1 tap, send a ping. 2 taps, call backup. Her breath caught. She looked at Malik. He didn't look back, didn't explain. He just leaned back in his seat, still quiet, like someone who knew exactly how much time was left on the clock. And somewhere in the back row, a man shifted, not nervously, not loudly, just enough. Dark suit, no tie. Hands clasped, eyes locked, on Malik. Most people didn't notice him, but if you did, you'd know immediately. He wasn't watching out of concern. He was waiting for confirmation. His name was Darius Thompson, but no one knew that yet. And Malik never turned around. He didn't need to, because silence, when chosen, is louder than any outburst. And sometimes, staying still is how you prepare to turn everything. Officer Grant thought the courtroom belonged to him again. He leaned back with that same familiar smirk, the kind of smile men wear when they believe no one will stop them. Not here. Not today. Not in front of a judge who already nodded before hearing a word. The footage was tossed, the truth buried, and Malik, still cuffed, still silent. So Grant did what men like him always do when they think the story's over. He taunted. "No one's here to save you, boy." Not loud, no theatrics, just casual cruelty, spoken like a fact. And for a second, he was right. No one moved, not the judge, not the bailiff, not the jury, until one chair scraped softly from the very back. Man stood, tall, composed, dark suit, no tie, white shirt clean as marble. He didn't raise his hand, didn't clear his throat. He walked down the center aisle, slow, certain, like he belonged there, like he had done this before. Some heads turned, some held their breath. But Malik never looked back. He already knew. The man stepped into the open space between the gallery and the bar, and in a voice so low it made everyone lean in, he said, "I am." 2 words, but they cut the room like glass. Grant blinked, straightened, trying to hold on to whatever authority he thought he still had. But the man was already reaching inside his coat. No rush, no drama. He pulled out a leather badge case, flipped it open. Gold glinted under courtroom lights. Darius Thompson, Deputy Director. Federal Bureau of Investigation. No shouting, no theatrics, just truth, delivered like a closing argument no one could object to. The room paused, not just in sound, in air, in understanding. A juror clenched his jaw. A reporter dropped her pen. The clerk froze mid-keystroke. And Judge Walters, he went pale. Grant didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His face said everything, because in that moment, the balance flipped. Darius didn't even look at Grant. Not yet. He turned to Judge Walters, calm, focused, and with a voice that carried the full weight of law, said, "You silenced my son." A pause. If
Not
this
for
story
drama,
moved you,
for clarity,
even just a little, now you'll hear the
maybe it's
sound of
because deep
accountability.
down,
It wasn't
you still
a threat.
believe silence
It
can
wasn't
speak
anger.
volumes.
It was inevitable.
That dignity doesn't need
Judge
to shout.
Walters didn't blink. That
Didn't
truth
breathe.
doesn't have to be loud.
Just
stared,
just
frozen,
undeniable.
exposed. Malik Thompson didn't
Malik
raise
turned slightly
his
in
voice,
his seat,
still
but he
cuffed.
changed a courtroom.
He looked over
A
his
city,
shoulder,
not
maybe
smug,
more, not surprised,
not by breaking the
and
system,
smiled, but by
just
standing
a
still,
small curl of
long
the lip
enough for it
then
to
whispered
break
to
itself.
Ava,
Told you someone would
If
notice.
you believe in stories
the room
like this,
stayed quiet.
stories
But
that
Darius
reflect
stepped
courage,
forward,
truth,
not as a
and
father,
quiet power.
but as a man who knew the law.
Please take a moment
and how
to
to
share
use
this
it.
video.
Your Honor,
Tag someone
he
who
began.
still believes
I am
justice
formally
matters.
requesting a special evidentiary hearing.
Comment
Judge Walters
below
scrambled.
what part stayed with you.
On what grounds?
And hit subscribe.
He asked. Voice
Because
cracking.
here at Mr. Mac Stories,
Darius
we
didn't
don't
even
just tell
blink.
stories.
Prosecutorial
We tell the kind that stay
misconduct,
with you
judicial
long
bias,
after the screen
and
goes dark.
falsification of testimony.
Thank
by
you for
Officer
watching.
Grant.
Thank
Boom.
you for feeling.
Just like that,
And thank
the
you
narrative
for
shattered.
walking this journey
Ava
with us.
stood. Strong, clear. We are submitting verified footage, reviewed and authenticated by the FBI. It confirms that Malik Thompson intervened to prevent harm, not cause it. The clerk hit a key. The screen lit up. Same footage, but this time with an official time code. Federal watermark. Chain of custody. No more excuses. There, on screen. Officer Grant shoving the old man. Malik stepping in, arms out. No aggression, just protection. The moment it ended, Darius opened a second folder. Thick, stamped. He handed it to the clerk. Internal Affairs records. 3 separate misconduct complaints involving Officer Grant over the last 5 years. All 3 scheduled for judicial review. He looked directly at Judge Walters. All three dismissed by you. Silence. Sharp. Tangible. Judge Walters didn't touch his gavel. Couldn't. This wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was a reckoning. Darius took one final step. By order of federal authority, he said louder now, Officer Grant, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and falsifying official records. Gasps. Motion. A ripple of disbelief. Two federal agents entered from the side door, like shadows summoned by truth. They moved in. Grant's mouth opened, but no sound came. The cuffs clicked. Not rough, not rushed, just final, right there. In front of the judge, in front of Malik, in front of everyone who thought this boy had no power. Walters stayed frozen, color draining from his face. He looked at Darius, then Ava, then Malik. But he didn't speak, didn't apologize, just lowered his gaze and said nothing, because sometimes silence isn't power. Sometimes it's surrender. The moment the cuffs clicked around Officer Grant's wrists, the room didn't erupt. It exhaled. Phones went up, quietly at first. Then, all at once, the soft rustle of cameras like rainfall after a drought. Within minutes, the video went online. Shaky, raw, undeniable. A federal arrest. In a courtroom. In front of a boy who never raised his voice. The captions spread fast. Justice for Malik. It started with a few retweets. A handful of TikToks. Then, it ignited. News anchors looped the clip. Comment. Sections lit up. Hashtags stacked like bricks. Justice for Malik. Silence is power. Let the courtroom fall. But Malik, he didn't check his phone, didn't flinch. He stood, still cuffed, and stepped forward. The bailiff hesitated, a glance to Judge Walters, who gave none back. The order had already changed hands. A federal agent stepped forward, removed the cuffs. No ceremony, just truth, setting weight down. Malik rubbed his wrists once, then looked forward. Eyes unblinking under the harsh courtroom lights. He didn't rush, didn't speak, just walked. Beside him, Darius Thompson stood tall. No badge showing, no authority shouted. Just a father, finally in step with his son. As they reached the courtroom doors, a voice called out. A young reporter, barely heard over the buzz. Malik, why didn't you speak up sooner? He paused. Not to think, to let the noise fall away. He turned, face calm, back straight, and said, because when justice speaks for you, you don't need to yell. No slogans, no defiance, just a truth that cut deeper than sound. Darius looked at him, not as a deputy director, not as a man with rank, just as a father. A father who had missed too many moments that mattered. He leaned close. I missed your childhood, he said softly, but I won't miss your courage. Malik didn't reply. He just nodded. Once, firm, and they walked. No hand on shoulder. No, arms linked, just two men, father and son, walking side by side, step for step, not toward a press conference, not toward a headline, toward something bigger. Behind them, someone began to clap, then another, and soon, a quiet chorus filled the marble room. Not like applause at a show, but like respect rising from the floorboards, warm, earnest, unforced. They didn't wave, didn't stop, because this wasn't about the crowd. It was about every boy who'd been told to sit down, every father who thought he'd waited too long, every truth that had been buried beneath uniforms and silence. And now was walking free. They silenced a boy, but they awakened a generation. Outside the courthouse, the world was waiting. Microphones leaned forward, cameras flashed like fireworks behind clouds. Questions stacked on top of each other, tangled in noise. Is this the start of something bigger? Will there be more arrests? What does this mean for other cases? Malik, how do you feel right now? But Malik Thompson didn't answer. He blinked against the daylight, as if it didn't surprise him, and walked. Later that day, a woman stood alone in the gallery, older, dignified. She hadn't said a word all trial, but now, as Grant was led away in cuffs, she whispered to no one in particular. He didn't raise his voice, but his silence hit louder than any gavel, and she was right. Because Malik didn't beg, didn't scream, didn't explode. He waited, and when truth arrived, he met it like he'd been expecting it all along. A screenshot of him smiling, just as the cuffs clicked shut behind Officer Grant, went viral. It became a symbol. A digital mural of calm defiance. By nightfall, the FBI had launched a full internal review. Judge Walters's past rulings were pulled from archives. Media outlets called it a systemic shake. But for most people, it wasn't about agencies or courtrooms or even headlines. It was about something they had felt and feared and buried for years. It was about a boy who didn't shout but still got heard. People weren't just watching, they were remembering. They were recognizing, and for the first time in a long time, they weren't just angry, they were ready. Not ready to fight louder, but to stand firmer, to speak smarter, to believe again. Malik Thompson didn't bring a revolution. He reminded us that one had already begun, silently.